And with that, let me turn it over to Allison and Stephanie. Thank you both.
Wonderful. Awesome. I'm going to put up the presentation so we can get started. Can everyone see? Great. Awesome. Okay, well, welcome everybody. We're super excited to be here and to talk to you guys about the program and just some ways that we can bring inclusion into all the programs with JUF. And, you know, both Allison and myself are here to help you along the way. So just quickly, the agenda that we're going to go through today are the introductions of Allison and myself, the importance of inclusion becoming belonging, because we just never stop at inclusion, the role considerations, a few scenarios, and then we will leave time for Q&A. If you guys do have questions and want to ask them anonymously or through the chat, can you just send them to Ben, and he will be able to filter through those and ask them. All right.
Here we are. All right. Hi, everybody. I'm not sure how many are on this particular meeting right now, but it looks like maybe a few. I don't know if we have enough time to just kind of quickly introduce others on the meeting, or if we want to just jump into the information. But I'll start with just introducing myself. Hello, everybody. I am the Director of Supports for People with Disabilities at JCFS Chicago. In our department, we do a lot of different things, from outpatient mental health services to a range of supportive services to individuals with disabilities and parents and caregivers. So my background is in mental health counseling. I am a psychotherapist, but I also just oversee our administrative services here at JCFS and services for people with disabilities. And I am a giant nature nerd. And love to spend most of my time when I'm not working out in the world, just kind of navigating and exploring nature. And I facilitate forest therapy sessions for people who also like to connect with nature. So that's a little bit about myself. I'm excited to be here with you today. Not profess to be an expert, but I do profess to share some insights from my professional experience, also from my personal and lived experience with invisible disabilities. And so I'm glad to be able to share with you today and look forward to our time.
Awesome. So I am Stephanie Darnell. I am the Director of Recreation at Keshet. So a little bit about my background. I'm a therapeutic recreation specialist. It's just called a CTRS, and I'm a certified autism specialist. I've been doing this work for about 15 years and have worked in multiple settings. For most of that time, though, it was either in mental health or working with IDDD, whether through that's park districts or agencies like Keshet that provide multiple different services. I guess my fun fact is I changed my major 4 times in undergrad. And I found recreation therapy by Googling what is something that is like a special education teacher and a nurse. And then it came up rec therapy. And so I went with it and decided my whole career was going to be based off that. So I will forever be grateful to Google. And again, super happy to be here and talking with you all today.
All right. So we talked before, just a moment, that really what we're here talking about is belonging. And with YLD and the peers programming, having like a sense of welcoming and community is pretty important. And that we recognize that maybe sometimes people don't always feel a sense of welcome because perhaps maybe in their experience, they haven't always been welcomed. We're looking at things like diversity, equity, that lends itself to inclusion, that lends itself to the feeling of the experience that we have that is called belonging. And so here on this particular screen, we look at some of those concepts. Diversity is the mix of people that come together with different experiences. Inclusion is the act or the intention of bringing together people with mixed experiences and personal stories and backgrounds. And then belonging is that sense that we have because all of these things have taken place. It's a space that we feel like, aha, we've arrived home. But that doesn't always happen all the time. And so something I'd like to just kind of walk us through for just a few minutes. And Stephanie, this came to me earlier today. I would have mentioned this when we met the other day, but I was like, oh, we have to do this. So it's just a little visual, I think, if we can kind of think about what, when we think about being a peer and a part of this program, what might kind of come from this. So if we can just take a moment, and I just invite you to maybe close your eyes or to kind of, think a little bit as I read through a couple of scenarios. And if we have a few minutes to talk about it, great, we can come to it at the end too. But just for a moment, I'd like for you to imagine you're going to a YLD event, and this is the very first time you've done a YLD event. You think you might know people there, but you're not really sure. You've never really done this before. You're excited, you're nervous, this is new. You just don't know what to expect, but you're going to do it and you're going to go. And so now you arrive at this event. Perhaps it's a get together at a bar, perhaps it is a party, and you've just made it there. You did everything you could to get there, and you're looking around, and what you notice is maybe not too many people that you know. Maybe there's really nobody there that you know, but now you've arrived. And as you've arrived, you're just kind of standing there. And at this time, people are walking past you. You notice there's a group that's kind of gathering in the corner, and you wonder if that's the group that you're supposed to meet up with, but you're not really sure. And so nobody has introduced themselves to you, and nobody has come up to you, and you're just kind of standing there. So how does that feel? And what thoughts come to mind to you? And so maybe just for a second, just kind of sit with that a moment. And in the next moment, I'm going to invite you to maybe just, again, close your eyes and kind of a similar scenario. Now, this time, imagine you're going to a YLD event, and it's a great party at a cool bar, and you're really excited to go, and you're looking forward to it. But you've never done something like this before, and you're not really sure that there's going to be anybody there that you know. But you're excited and you're nervous, so you're going to do it. And so this time you arrive, and you don't really see anybody you know, but you do see a group of people kind of gathering together, having a fun time over in the back corner. And now somebody from this group notices you, and they think, I wonder if this person might be a part of our group. I've not seen them before. And so they've come up to you and they say, hi, my name is Allison. Are you here for the YLD event? I've not noticed you before. I'm glad you're here. Let me introduce you to people. And so you walk in, and now you're talking to people, and you have a sense of, aha, this feels good. This is where I'm supposed to be today. I think our idea is to facilitate that sense of connection, that sense of belonging through a welcomed sense of engagement and a sense that this is something that I can participate into. Regardless of my ability, regardless of my disability, having a sense of belonging in the communities that we are a part of is integral to who we are as a community and who we are as a people. So our work today, so our conversation is going to lend ourselves a little bit more toward that sense of acceptance, inclusion, connection, and belonging. And to do that, we're going to look at a couple of different scenarios that we might encounter. And again, I want to acknowledge that I am not an expert. And so if there are folks who want to contribute and share their experience, we welcome that as well. So that's, I'm sorry, my computer just went a little fritzy a moment there. All right.
All right, so we do want to take some time to talk about the role of being a peer and its importance and how together we can be creating that sense of belonging. So really developing that connection. So you are at this, as like Allison's scenario is a perfect visual of, different ways that you can approach this event and developing a connection with not only the people that are in the room, your peer and your surroundings, really embracing every moment in that environment and developing a connection and a relationship with that. Getting to know people around you, socializing with your peer, and getting to know your peer and their likes and dislikes. It's huge and it's extremely important. Being natural and friendly, be yourself. One thing that is very common in my years of experience working with people with all abilities is that there is a persona that you have to be somebody different, and that's not true. You get to be yourself and create that, you know, that relationship just the way you are. If you have questions, if you are, you know, wanting to learn more information about an individual, that's perfect. We are open books here on, as we're talking about it today. And the people at JUF and the people within YLD are also going to be there to help and support you. So be natural, be friendly, and be yourself. Modeling. So modeling can go a bunch of different ways. Allison, please interject for this because my version of it's definitely going to be different than yours. I love to model of how to my staff and to my volunteers of how situations can look and how to react in situations. We're going to talk about that a little more in the scenario, but a lot of times you're learning in the moment. So asking somebody around you if they can model like, oh, how do we do hand over hand? That's always a great example. Or how do we work with somebody who maybe is not, we would like to say that uses verbal communication, but maybe they use a device. So can you model as that leader how to use that? Or your peer that you're working with can model it for you and they can show you how they do that. I think that's really important to understand that you need to be learning as you're going. And Allison, do you have anything to add on to that?
I think modeling is also a component of what I like to call knowing yourself and reading the room. So who are you in this space and time? And in this space, you know, what might you need from somebody? What might you benefit from somebody? As you're somebody who's in the room, reading the room, what are you noticing about what might be helpful to others in the room? Do you have familiarity with something like communication tools that could be helpful for somebody? Do you know what it feels like to be shy and to be not really sure about how to engage with new people? How might you facilitate that for somebody who maybe just doesn't know how to even say hello or introduce themselves? Because if you're someone like me, a recovering shy person, it can be a little bit hard to kind of extend yourself out there. So how might you want to be treated is how you might want to treat other people in these new situations.
Exactly. And then recognizing your environment, which again, we were kind of already talking about then, and just looking at the space in itself. So every event that you're going to attend with YLD is going to potentially look different. So going to a bar and in that socialized environment, that could be loud. There could be other stimulations around you. There could be more people that aren't involved with the environment, or maybe you're doing like a game night just within the JUF community. So that is a different type of social environment, right? We're going to get into a little bit of the, you know, different sensory stimulations that could be in an environment that could impact, you know, any event, but we'll get to that on the next slide. And also just socializing and being a support system. You are not there to babysit. You are not there to hover. You are there to be a peer, to be a friend. And that is something that is just so important too, that like some of my participants, like that I've worked with forever, have been in an environment like this. I was their volunteer, and then now I have worked with them in different, you know, different programming for the last 10 years, but it started as a volunteer. It started as a peer and just bringing that friendship and that trust into the room.
I think there's a lot of opportunity for in the areas that I work in, we provide a lot of paid support to people who identify with a disability. Sometimes their disabilities are visible disabilities, sometimes their disabilities are invisible disabilities, but there's a certain amount of expectation of paid support. And in this environment, in this opportunity with the YLD events. This isn't that. These are individuals who are coming to hang out, to do things that you and I do with our friends and other groups that we're involved in. The expectation, I don't think, is to fall within that role of being a paid staff person or somebody who's responsible for somebody else. Our role is to be able to be a support person to somebody who may need it. And so there are things that might happen. Ask if somebody might need some help. Don't assume. We wouldn't want to just kind of encroach on somebody's space. But if it's feeling like or seeming like it could be beneficial to somebody, asking if there's anything they need help with or assistance with might be a way to go. Allowing that person their individuality, however it comes out, is really important because that's what we do with our friends. I have a friend who's very loud, and there's nothing that is going to happen to get this person to be any less loud than she really is. And we could be in the most quiet space like a movie theater, and my friend is the friend whose laughter is filling up the entire theater. It's loud, and we let that be. And so my role isn't to squash her joy or her loudness or her laughing. My job is to be her friend who might be slightly embarrassed because she's laughing. So we're really working toward facilitating those connections of friendship, belonging, with a little bit of kind of the equity piece in it. There are some things that we have to do to kind of adjust a situation so that if somebody needs a little more support, they have it. So that if an environment isn't entirely what is beneficial to somebody, that there's something there that might be able to bridge that disconnect. So back on kind of the concepts of diversity, equity, and inclusion, looking at how we can address the environment and look at the environment to be the most beneficial to the people who are there. So some of you might have seen kind of the imaging around equity where there's a fence and there are 3 people and each of the individuals need to look over the fence. And one person's really tall and they can look over the fence perfectly fine. Another person's a little bit shorter and so they need a box to stand on. And so they get a box and now they're able to look over the fence just as well as the person who's very tall. And the third person might use a wheelchair. And so they need a ramp to be able to go up and be able to look over the fence just as much as the other 2 people. That is an example of equity, finding different ways to make sure people have access to the same thing. And so finding different ways in our social environments, in our physical environments, so that everybody feels a sense of equity, which ultimately leads to that sense of belonging.
All right, so now we're going to dive in talking about some considerations within that sense of belonging. So I also want to go back to that too, because we talk about inclusion a lot. That is like the cool word. It's what people do, and everyone talks about inclusion. And really what we want to talk about today too is never bypassing inclusion, but us doing our jobs so well that not only is the environment inclusive, but it does create that sense of belonging. So everybody is we all feel like we belong. And that is so important. I never want to, belittle inclusion. It is what Keshet's foundation is made of. We do inclusion every day and I love it. But as we are growing and we're learning so much more, it really is creating that sense of belonging and making everybody feel welcome. So some of the considerations that you will encounter as a peer, some processing time and speed. So I'm going to give an example. So Allison, I'm going to ask you a question and delay your processing and we're just going to wing it. All right. So Allison, what is your favorite color? Is it blue? Is it green? Red? Allison, did you hear me?
Stephanie, my favorite color is orange.
That's awesome. So I know it seems silly, but now we're going to do it again. And I'm going to allow Allison to take some time to process, to think about what I'm asking her and then say it back to me. So I'm gonna change the question on you. Allison, what is your favorite food?
My favorite food right now are strawberries.
Yum, I love strawberries. And then that's just a starting point of conversation. So, I could actually start asking about a million different things about strawberries to Allison. But giving her that initial time to process the question that you're asking her. We live in such a fast-paced environment, and typically we are giving one instruction to the next to hit an end goal. Take your time. Let everyone think about it, and it's okay. Sometimes there will be that where your peer did or your participant didn't hear you, or they don't have the answer to the question, and that's okay too. But again, making sure you give that time to them. Anything to add to that?
I might also add, just again, kind of going back to the previous screen, is that our environment can affect how we take in information. And regardless of what our experience in life is, if we're in a new environment, if we're in a loud environment, if we're in a busy environment, that may contribute to how we respond to each other. Some of us might be hyperactive and really kind of like whip out the answers and the actions and the interactions. And some of us might just need a little bit more time because there's so much happening in our environment. We have to kind of manage it all before we can formulate a response. Allowing ourselves some recognition that today I might be feeling like I just need a little bit of time to answer these questions. And the next time I might be like super comfortable and super fine in the area and can be really, quicker with how I respond and interact.
Definitely. And also we have to keep in mind too that we are building trust. We are building a friendship and socializing, building a relationship with one another. So again, that does take time. And that's just on top of everything else that's going on.
Absolutely. And I would also say that making friends as an adult is not like making friends as children. So as we move into friendships as adults, it's a little bit of a different ball game than when we were kids and we just got together and we ran around or we played ball or our parents facilitated a activity with another friend. Social emotional intelligence as an adult is a different very much a different fun thing to be learning as than when we were children.
Definitely. I also, we want to touch base. I know if a lot of people, it's like we talk about sensory a lot, and sensory can look very different to everybody. Like my own sensory issues are loud noises. And if I'm in a meeting, I bought a whole bin of sensory tools and fidgets for the whole team. I took everything out of the bin that clicks, because the clicking is just a sound that just, it makes me overstimulated, and then I can't focus, and then I'm not able to get through the meeting, and I'm like on my words and I'm just hyper focused on the clicking. So keeping in mind, everybody has a different sensory need. Some of that could be smell, sound, texture, light. There's a bunch of different things that can trigger sensory overstimulation. For example, we have been at Keshet talking a lot about the cicadas and how the cicadas are coming and how is that going to be overstimulating to just the environment of being outside. Some of these programs are going to be outside and the cicadas are coming. So what is in that environment that could be triggering? So one huge one is the sound. So we're going to go through some scenarios later, but think about that. Like, what do we do if the sound is too loud? How do we navigate a situation like that depending on where you are? In our cicada situation, we have options. So we can use headphones. We can go into an indoor environment. We've even gone to the extent of playing videos of the noises that it's going to sound like to get our kiddos and our adults prepared of what it's going to sound like when you walk outside for like a month. So things like that, that really you know, we might not think that, oh, this is going to affect our everyday, but it really will.
I would say on the flip side of that, there are also things where sensory oriented, we might need a lot of it. I am a super fan of drumming. I like how drumming feels. I like the vibrations from it. I like the deeper sound of it. It's very meditative and rhythmic for me. And I really appreciate it. I also appreciate a really warm, tight, like sweater when it's cold outside. So things that might be really a lot. Maybe it might be too much for somebody else, but it might be the exact right thing for another person. I work with children a lot, and one of the situations that I often encounter, I had a person who was a little kid when I met them, and now they're an adult. And one of the things that they really appreciated was being able to I'm trying to think of what it is. It's like it's kind of like a trampoline. And you can just bounce on it. You can bounce with your feet. You can bounce sitting down. You can just, full body experience of bouncing. And having that sensation of movement was really soothing and helpful to them. But they needed a lot of it. So there are folks, and in some areas, I'm also like Stephanie, where I just needed a little bit more quiet and I can't tolerate certain noises. But in other areas, I need a lot more input. And so we could encounter folks where that's the case too. And sometimes in the same situation, you're going to have those folks who a little too overstimulating, and those folks where it's not stimulating enough. And that happens a lot.
So moving on actually to another form of potentially overstimulation and anxiety, being in environments, in social environments, are the perseverating and questioning. We have worked with individuals and that, their form of overstimulation is asking a question that's sometimes over and over and over again. But that is a part of who they are. So the answer, even though the answer is not changing, maybe they have to go through a sequence of asking the same question 5 or 6 times. I see that a lot. It's a form of anxiety for some of my individuals that I work with, depending on the environment that we're in, depending on the sensory stimulation around, and just who they're with on that day. One thing to think about too is with the questioning. Sometimes you are asked very personal questions. Where do you live? What is your last name? Do you have a sister? Are you married? These things happen to me on a daily basis, so I can just rattle them off, but you do not have to answer them. It is perfectly appropriate to not share all of that information with your peer buddy, but you might get asked it, and that's okay.
And I think along the lines with that, when we think back around like belonging and inclusion and thinking about just kind of making friends, there's just a lot of things we might not share with people we first meet. And it's just kind of a common part of getting to know somebody. And that having our boundaries around what information we share with people is something that we kind of manage and think about in any interaction we have, whether it's with a peer through the YLD program, or that person we just meet at the gym, or the person in our book club. So thinking about all of the ways in which you feel comfortable sharing information, and thinking about all the ways in which somebody may need to gain information in order to feel comfortable is a balance. And in terms of like the peer program, if somebody is attending a program, an event, and these are things that might be coming up for them, these are ways in which we might think about, well, how can I be a support to this person? What does this person need right now? And at the end of the day, my recommendation would be to just ask, how are you doing? Is there anything you need right now?
And asking those questions, again, just go into maybe your, peer does stim or need something to self-soothe in an environment like that. So a lot of times when somebody is overstimulated, they want to get up and take a walk. That is their self-soothing. Maybe they stim and they jump and they flap. That is another form of stimming. Stimming can be a bunch of different things too, and everybody is different. We could probably spend a whole hour on talking about it. But one of your peers or the person that you're working with may, want to get up and jump right in the middle of the activity. That's what they need to do right then and there. And that is perfectly fine. That is just who they are. And they'll go through usually a whole sequence of motions or that whole self-soothing process, and then they'll go right back to the activity. I think, again, like Allison mentioned, it's getting to know who they are as the individual that you're working with. And again, just accepting that that's who they are, creating that sense of belonging. If I need to get up and jump around the room for 30 seconds and come back and we can finish playing bingo, then that's just what I need to do for right then. And that's okay. And being open to that and being open to learning that. One thing about, being their friend is not somebody stands up and you're like, wait, you got to sit down. We got to follow the sequence. They're about to call the next, number in bingo. If you're standing and jumping, you're not going to hear it. It's letting that happen, coming back and be like, hey, Allison, did you hear they just called B11? And then going right back to the activity. It's a normal for a lot of the individuals with different abilities that you could potentially be working with. All right, anything to add, Allison, or can I go to the next slide?
I think we're good.
Awesome.
So we have a couple of scenarios that in the different areas of social activities we've been a part of. These are things that might come up. But we definitely want to hear your questions too. Are there things that are on your mind? But we thought we'd just kind of give a little bit of kind of groundwork of what we might do or what might come up, but please do also feel free to share what might come up for you in response to these. So we talked a little bit before about, what might you do if somebody's asking you a lot of personal questions or things about like contact information, how might you handle that? If there's the need to redirect because maybe you're feeling uncomfortable about it, how might you do that? And then also just to kind of, again, this is somebody you're meeting for the first time. I'm sure there are other people who may be asking those same questions of you too. How do you want to keep your own boundary around what information you're comfortable sharing with anybody who may be asking for it? So when I'm asked kind of personal questions, I also have to kind of keep in mind that I'm coming from more times than not a place of like a professional role with somebody. And so given like my ethics and my training and my background, in the world of social work and especially in the world of clinical social work, there's very strong rules around how much information you share and why you share it and all that fun stuff. So in a professional setting, I'm going to be more careful and more boundaried around what information that I might have, but I'm also going to be honest and I'm also going to be sensitive to what I share, regardless of my professional or personal role. If I do feel comfortable sharing something about myself personally, I'll share it. I have no problem with that. Why not? But if it's starting to feel like it's overwhelming me, I might say something like, I'm not really comfortable sharing that with you just yet. Maybe down the road when we get to know each other better. Or, I'm actually not okay answering that question. Let's go do this instead. I see that there's this over there. And moving towards something that can kind of distract from what might be coming up. But in a relationship, when you're building kind of a connection and a friendship with somebody, you're going to take it at your own pace, and that's okay. Is there anything, Stephanie, you want to add about that?
No, I think you tackled that first scenario exactly how I would. But again, everybody is different. And sometimes I've even encountered when I'm like, you know, we're going to talk about that maybe when we get to know each other a little better. I have gotten the pushback of, well, I want to know now. But again, that's really where that redirect becomes important, to being able to go back to the task at hand and stand your ground. It's okay. You are allowed to set those boundaries. So moving on to the next scenario. So an individual is spending a lot of their time on the outskirts of the event. Sometimes we're walking around the event. Sometimes we're sitting on the outside of the event, but not really being in the event. So again, kind of not being in that inclusive environment right here, but inclusion can look so different for so many people. So we might think that, oh, Stephanie is sitting on the other side of the room and not, you know, socializing with everybody at the table, playing the games. But to Stephanie, that might be the way that she goes, like that's her inclusive environment. That's the way that she feels like she's belonging, even just sitting in the room. That's okay. Not everybody needs to engage, but you should check in with them. So, Allison, can you give me an example of how you would check in with me, since I used me as the participant?
Right. So Stephanie, you're kind of out, you know, maybe watching what's happening, and I'm noticing this, and so maybe I'm just going to walk over and be like, "Hey, how are you? What do you think?"
I'm fine. I just want to sit over here.
Okay, cool. Well, if you want to come in, I'm going to be sitting over here, so feel free to wander over, and if you want to hang over by me, that's awesome. But I'm glad that you're here and able to kind of hang out with us. So I'll check in with you in a little bit. Cool.
Yeah, that's cool. And then sometimes too, that like you'll have that like where you set that tone of like you don't have to engage, participants will then become more interested. Like if there's no pressure, right? To participate. And then it's like, oh, well, what are you doing at that table? A little bit closer. When you go and check in, it's like, oh, who are you talking to? But again, setting that environment and that tone that it's okay if we're not necessarily engaging right now, but you have the choice and the autonomy to make that decision when you are ready.
Stephanie, we actually have a question from
Awesome.
Mikey. Feel free to unmute.
Hey, yeah, thank you so much. I guess for that specific situation, what if the person that we're with is nonverbal? Like, how would we check in on them to make sure that they're having a good time? If there's that barrier.
So my hunch is that the person may use different forms of communication to share what it is that they need to share. And they may use a device, they may use things that are called PECS, Picture Exchange Communication System. They may use behavior, they may use sign language. There are probably lots of ways that they are able to communicate that isn't just spoken language. And so what I would do is I would, you know, check in and see what information do you know about what the communication style is of that person. Do they bring something with them that helps them communicate? Is there information that was shared with the peer about what their communication needs are? I would do things that, you know, ask, are you okay? Everything good? And using our own spoken language is okay to do. That person may respond in a different way. Sometimes we may pair it with things. I couple my spoken language with some limited signs all the time. And sometimes just the simple act of walking over to somebody and hanging out with them in their space may be communication enough for them to feel like, okay, this is a good thing for me now. I will say, Mickey, at the end of the day, ask.
Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anything you want to add about that, Stephanie?
No, that's a great question. One thing that I do a lot, especially when I'm unsure, I will ask very simple questions. So like, are you okay? And then I will take my hands and go, yes or no. And sometimes they'll hit a hand, sometimes they'll be completely ignored. But again, starting with that simple question, that sometimes helps too. But again, like Allison said, really getting that information beforehand and getting a little about me, about your peer will really help.
Thank you.
All right, so if we don't have any more questions on that one, we're gonna move on to the last one, and then so we can take some time to open up the floor for any additional questions. So an individual takes an inappropriate amount of food or does something unsanitary with food. It happens all the time. So what I typically do in this situation is a redirect. Or if you know this about your participant before we're going to get the food, say we're going to get donuts, be like, okay, 1 donut, 1 cup of juice, and setting that tone beforehand. Or since you are a peer and you are their friend, model that. So, okay, I'm walking down the donut line. I'm gonna get 1 donut. How many are you gonna get? You're gonna get 1, right? Turning it into a fun conversation. 1 cup of juice. We can always come back for more if that's an option. And a lot of times when, individuals might drop something on the floor and pick it up and eat it, you interject the best you can and say, let's pick it up and throw it on the floor. But you know what? Sometimes that 5-second rule just turns into 6 seconds, and it is what it is. Just really being aware of that too. I always carry extra hand sanitizer with me. Because a lot of times somebody's grabbing, what if they're touching their face and grabbing food and things like that. So there's a lot of different scenarios, but I will say like modeling and has always been what works the best, you going first and really watching and setting that tone.
And I think also in addition to that, these are, social settings where kind of the social norm or the expectation may not always be known. And so kind of demonstrating what is there is also important. And then on the flip side, so they take a lot of food. So somebody doesn't do exactly what you would do. It is what it is. I think, again, we're not there to police people. We're not there to, determine for them what is good or right for them. But in a social setting, we do also just kind of want to help people be their best selves. And so in some situations, food can be a comfort to people. And it may be where I know if you're in my family, so many of our conversations and the things we do involve food and hanging out in the kitchen and sharing food and all of that fun stuff. And there are people I know who like to have more than what I might take. But that's just a part of how we all kind of relate to each other. So on the one hand, yeah, we want to support and be careful and encourage people to kind of also recognize that this is the food that's there and there are other people who need this too. And so just kind of being reciprocal and aware of the people around us. But then also just allowing that person to be and have what it is that that person wants and needs at that time. So a little bit of like a but but these are scenarios or situations that come up a lot. And so how do we want to think about them and what is in the best interest of the event, of the participants in the event, and then who we are as a support person for somebody.
I think with all of these scenarios too, and just being human beings, we don't live in a black and white world, right? We live in the gray. So, and that is perfect. That is, that's how we go through life. But that's how we need to tackle some of these scenarios too. Like, we're not going to always know, like, okay, I'm working with Allison and I know if she grabs too much food, all I have to say to her is, don't do that. And she's going to do that. Allison might be having a day that she might take the food and just then run away from me and then be upset with me. It's not going to be black and white in every scenario. And every individual you work with is different. So please just always keep that in mind. and it's a learning experience too. But I think we now have about 10 minutes to open the floor for questions. I'm going to stop sharing.
Go ahead, Victoria. Thank you.
Do you ever have participants that, I know that you said that this is about being a peer and not being a babysitter or a counselor or a nanny. Do you have participants that get worked up and run? And what do you do in that situation? Would it be the peer's responsibility to locate their peer, to follow them? Because if they're already in a state, do you want people following them and making them go further? And what do you do?
I can jump in real quick about specifically as it relates to how we're interpreting the inclusion training and our peer. This is a volunteer position, and it is not your responsibility for if something like that happens for you to go after that person. There will be professional staff at every YLD event that you would be connected with, that they would be the point person. If something extreme like that were to happen, you should go directly to them, and they can work on next steps.
Okay. Thanks.
I also feel like if this is like a world that you're interested in though, like I would take that time maybe after the event or during to like ask that staff of what they do in that situation for that particular peer. Just because, or for buddy, because it's just a good time to learn. Maybe there's precursors to that. That again, something else in the environment might have triggered that to where they felt like they needed to go, or maybe they are internally, they know every 15 minutes, they go out and they walk out of the room for 2 minutes and they come back in. So again, just really ask.
I would also think that in all of the different events that YLD offers, you will encounter individuals who, again, have visible disabilities, invisible disabilities, whose support needs, what we would call support needs, might be higher than somebody else's support needs. Individuals who may have a support person that comes with them, so that they can fully experience and really make use of the activity in a way that works best for them. And so some folks may experience the world around them more behaviorally, but perhaps that's somebody who's also going to have somebody with them that knows them, and be able to kind of support them as well. I think my understanding of the peer program, it's like, knowing that you're going to something and there's somebody there that you can touch base with to just kind of help give you an anchor to this new thing that you're doing, or to this group thing that you're doing. And so those individuals who are requesting a peer are probably individuals where that kind of touch person, that kind of touch point is really a source of support to them. And other individuals may bring a support person with them that can kind of help further facilitate that. Although I don't know that all the time somebody would bring a support person with them. But I suspect in these cases, given what I know about some of the events, that you're really just kind of like a nice kind of reassurance for somebody. I know when I go to a gathering, I always feel so much better when there's like that one face that I know. So you might be that one face.
Jessica, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess, how is the peer connection made? Like, do you email or, connect ahead of time, or do you connect at the event? And is there anything that you would recommend that like we ask when we're connected with a peer?
Absolutely. So how the program works is on every registration form for any YLD event, there's a box that somebody can request a peer in. Once we get that request in, I will send an email out to the full roster of trained peers, which all of you will be added to after tonight. And they'll send details about the event, maybe sometimes we include some basic information about kind of what the peers' needs are. That's not always the case, but in certain cases we do that. And then if you're available and interested in being a peer for that event, you'll just respond to that email, and I will connect you before the event to your peer. So that way, it's then up to you once you connect via email. If you want to, set up a call beforehand, if you want to just, pick a meeting point, like for example, when we do like a Cubs game outing, a lot of people will like say, we're going to meet in front of the sign, in front of the stadium at X time. And that way that there's some sort of like touch point before, and they know, and then you can walk into the event together. So that's common, but it's really up to you in terms of like how much of a connection before the event you'd like to have. But really all that's necessary is the touch point before, connect about a game plan of, when and where you're going to meet. And that can also be inside the event as well. Whoever the YLD staff can definitely help facilitate the in-person connection in terms of if you don't know exactly what the person's face look like, we can help make that happen. And if there's other, scenarios that come up that require some extra work, you can definitely work with me, and I can help through that. But for the most part, you'll be connected before the event in that way. Lena, go ahead.
Hi everyone. I'm sorry I was a little late, but I'm glad I was able to jump on the Zoom call. So I know I missed a little bit in the beginning, but I was wondering, you probably mentioned, but how old are the individuals we're going to be working with or be friends with, right? I should say friends or peers. And then also about the events. I mean, you brought it up already, the Cubs game. But what kind of other events do you do, and how many do you guys have per month, I guess? Thank you.
Awesome. So yeah, so YLD, the Young Leadership Division, we do our age range is 22 to 39, so 20s and 30s post college. And we have events all the time. We have, events like the Cubs game and like things that are more like fun social events, other sports outings. We do sports leagues and other, events with the goals of connecting young adults with one another and creating those connections of the Jewish community in Chicago. And then we also have, other various types of events that I'd say we honestly have probably like usually at least one event a week, if not more. So we have events all the time, and I'm happy to grab coffee with you, Lena, and tell you all about YLD and how to come to our events. So I love that question.
Yeah, thank you so much. I actually just moved here from New York, and I used to be like very involved with Chabad on the Upper East Side. I don't know if any of you guys know that. And I used to volunteer at the soup kitchen, and I haven't really gotten involved in the Jewish community here yet, but like any other community actually. So I would love to, be a part of something bigger, and especially now, with everything going on, I feel like it's very important that we help each other and stay strong and unite. So yeah, thank you for having me,
Awesome.
and thank you for organizing.
Yeah,
this,
we'll definitely
meeting.
we'll definitely connect offline, and we can.
Okay, I would love that. Sure. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Any other
Yes.
final thoughts? Sorry, go ahead, Mikey.
Yeah, I'm happy to squeeze in. Also, Lena, I was in your shoes a couple years ago. Definitely get coffee with the YLD folks. They're the best. Stephanie, I really like the yes, no thing you brought up. And I'm wondering if there's like any other like little tricks of the trade that you help to create that connection with the peers. Or Allison, that question was for you too. Just like little things that you just found to be super effective to just bridge that gap.
I mean, I call it like my toolkit. It's always my top 3 things are always offer a choice. Don't use the word no, and not saying that you give everybody exactly what they want, but use different verbiage. And meet somebody where they're at. So I actually even think about that like height too. So if somebody's sitting on the ground, you don't want to be like talking to them up here. You want to be sitting with them on the ground, or at least crouching down to where they're at. I think of, yes, I always am like, do we want to do this or that? Do we want to, if we're at a Cubs game, do we want to sit in the middle or sit on the end? what are the choices that you have that are both awesome choices? And it's not just sit here and you're fine. Or I have like so many random things in my toolkit. We could actually connect offline and I could talk to you about all of them depending on an individual that has even different, I work with a lot of individuals that have IDDD, or, physical disabilities, and how I would handle somebody that, is in, asking questions that has Down syndrome is different than I would with autism. And that is because of all the things that we talked about, the environment, the, sensory stimulation, the communication, really all of it. But I could go on forever, but meet them where they're at, don't say no, and provide choice.
Thank you.
I would also add to that, just kind of as you get familiar with the person that you're hanging out with, you might pick up on things where like, maybe you're gonna, use more simple language. Maybe it's gonna be shorter sentences. I do use a lot of, hey, first let's go do this, then we'll do that. So places where we can put kind of less language can be helpful. And then it's also okay to say things like, oh, wait a minute, I need to say something. Or I hear what you're saying and hold on, let me add this to it. So that you also have a voice in conversations as well. I think that having opportunities to do, just like checking in, like, you're good. Do you need anything? Are helpful ways to kind of express simple communication, especially when you're in busy spaces where it's loud or active. Those kind of visuals are helpful. I find them helpful when I'm out in the world, so I assume that others might find it helpful too. So things that, I also just think about, like, if I were in this position, what would be helpful to me? And maybe that might be something helpful in this situation. But again, at the end of the day, ask.
Thank you.
I also think like the body language and the tone that you use, that really helps create that rapport. To have that, again, even if it's nonverbal communication, because if it's like you're sitting there and you're like, you good, is very different than like, you're good. Like, I know it goes a really long way. And it's something that I work with my staff with all the time because, you might be in a busy environment, you might be overstimulated yourself. Again, like if I'm hearing a bunch of loud noises, it's hard for me to bring myself down to be like super excited for my buddy, for my participant, but they're having the time of their life and you got to do it. So, thinking about that too.
I should
What
also
what
mention-
about